agenda is just to adjourn into, what time is it? 9:36. Into executive session for consultation with attorney. So we're going to do that first briefly, hopefully, and then we'll resume. No action. All right, so the next item on the agenda is item 5, which is to discuss, consider, and or approve any changes to the salary schedule. And y'all feel free to give us your opinion, make some comments. You guys have all this information, right? Now, we've talked about the issues with elected official salaries and running again, and we've had that conversation, so probably not talking about that right now.
I thought that's what we were gonna talk about.
I thought that's all we're mostly here.
Elected officials?
Everybody.
Well,
Everybody.
I mean, everybody,
Nobody's
yeah.
exempt.
Right, absolutely, but I don't, good luck trying to figure that one out.
But we're here for that.
Yes, absolutely. So dive in. I don't have a solution.
Let's hear the problems. Anybody have any problems? Y'all are all here. Anybody?
Everybody's happy.
Like I say, with mine, with the new step program, everything. So we'll be doing it in a month, but everything is already kind of working better for us. The other program is going well so far.
What's, what I'd like to, I guess, the reason why this is kind of important to look at, as we've all talked about, I think several times already, or different times, maybe not several times, but there will be a moment, not just our elected officials, but all of our salaries, if we just keep bringing people in, people who worked 30 years with the county, even in road and bridge or library or something like that, and we bring the replacement in right at what the guy who was making before, it destroys morale for the people who's been there, like, golly, he's making as much as I am and he's brand new. So it takes down morale. And then the other aspect of that is we're going to hit a ceiling at some point where we don't make product. We don't make cogs and we make service, public service. And so most of our salaries should be, as per capita, as an organization, should never reach, that's with benefits and everything, should not hit 65% of our operating budget. I don't think we're at 65%. Kathy did some numbers 2 years ago when I first asked her about it. And I think we're at with benefits and everything, we were at 53. I mean, that's been years ago. I felt a lot of resistance, so I just said, I'm out. I pulled back because I could sense that nobody wanted to talk about salaries at that time. So we were just at 53, but within, I estimated 5 to 6 years, we would be above 70% if we keep just raising everybody over and over. And pretty soon we won't have enough to buy material, road, unless we just raise taxes. And how hard would that be to tell your constituents, hey, we're going to go ahead and raise the tax rate because we need more money for our employees, staff wise. Oh, well, the road's going to get better. We're going to have more services available. Oh, no, we can't afford that. We've got salaries to pay and retirement and medical and all of that. So we're not upside down yet, but our business model, our pyramid is tilting. And I think within 5 years, if we don't start fixing something, I appreciate Sheriff for saying that he's already kind of done a tier thing. I know that in y'all have a clerk 1, clerk 2, clerk 3 setting.
That's incentive.
It's incentive and it
You got
gives
built
you,
incentive.
yeah. And so I'm just asking that we talk about it, and we are. And so just kind of make a plan. And I also believe we have to be conscious of how much we make as elected officials and weigh it out. And I love this commissioner's court, because at first it was a little daunting. But I've talked to a couple of the commissioners, I'm not gonna say their names, they can say if they want. And they're okay with freezing their salaries or locking it in for a couple of years. Because they agree that, you know, if anybody's gonna start doing some action, it starts with us. And so I was proud of that. Again, I'm not gonna say who they are, that's their language, so, and they could vote against it now, because that was just a one-on-one conversation.
I'd never be in favor of asking employees to make any concessions unless we do it ourselves.
Yes,
And that has to be first.
but Mrs. Nancy, or I'm sorry, Judge.
No, go ahead. I
So
was
I
reading.
was just gonna kind of give you a lay of the land. So I'm well into my 4th year now with 3 branches. I've hired 3 new employees and I do not start them at the pay that the one that's exiting. So I have already implemented that.
Oh, thank you, Nancy.
But on the flip side, so a year that of my salary, my assistant made more than I did. And
That's horrible.
then, you know, I also drive 76 miles a week in between branches. And that's just on a normal week between Stinnett and Bridge. And I don't get, you know, any kind of compensation for that either. So those are.
Yeah. And that makes sense, because we pay we pay them some kind of, or vehicle allowance of some sort. So that makes sense. That's a good concern.
That's one of the things we have to fix, because we drive a lot of miles too, and we don't get
Yeah, it's incorporated in our
a lot
salary,
of people that,
I make,
I mean, it's,
no matter what the gas price
we
is.
all do.
Yeah, you're elected official though. I'm not, yeah, department head elected officials, that's
yeah, but
not
that's
day.
also a problem that some elected officials get. And I'm not saying I want it, but some elected officials do get vehicle allowance and pay for mileage.
I think they added that in our salary.
They
at
did.
one time. That's
At some
what it
point.
was.
And then we've talked about pulling it back out too. That's what I'm saying. As we make these decisions, we have to make something that's black and white as much as we can for everybody. And remember, we made those decisions going forward.
It needs to be available, even if you don't ask for it, it needs to be available.
And I'm not saying I want it. I'm just saying elected
No, I don't
officials,
want it.
there's been talk about some that want,
I drive my whole precinct
yeah.
2-3 times a month, but that's just part of it. That's just the way it is.
But that's
I
not
got
what we're
elected for
here. We're here for salaries.
And we
So,
want to make sure that our department heads and our employees and their employees aren't making the same amount, because, you know, that is not.
that's not
That's
cool.
not fair.
Yeah.
When you have, you know, 8, 9, 10 employees that you're taking care of, and then you have your top deputy that's making like saying maybe $5, you know, either more or less, you know, that needs to be fixed as well.
Well, I think, oh, go ahead.
Well, the only thing I was gonna say is like, if you start out making the same pay that somebody that's been here 30 years, and you're gonna stay at that same level, what's the incentive to do anything extra? Why would you try to get better and move up when there's really no place to move up?
Yeah.
And so that's the name of the game. Advance yourself. I'm proud of what you do, but some areas that's not there at all.
Well, I know our constituents, as they look at our salaries, and now that it's posted, I don't know if y'all have ever, if the county's ever been posted before, maybe it has, I've never paid attention. I knew mine, ours is,
Legally.
well,
Legally, you
I didn't
have
know
to.
if anybody, if
If
they
you
were,
give pay raises.
if they were posted in the, but anyway, so the citizens are looking at it, and they're already, and not all of them, but there are some crying foul. It looks,
Yeah, they
it looks
should.
bad, yeah, it looks bad, and you say, well, they're not, they don't know what all we do. And if you were to work for Phillips, they would pay this. That's apples to oranges. And I know that seems harsh to say, but we're in public service. We provide a service to the public. Now, I don't mean we should be scraping by no means. I'm not of that school either, and that we should be low paid, but there has to be a balance. And we owe it to our constituents, or at least I feel like I owe it to look at my salary and go, ooh, that's a lot for a 20-hour a week job for
Got
the
how much?
20 hours a week. Now Ben may work 40.
Get out for me.
Yeah.
It's a little more than that.
But anyway, so,
Y'all still don't work 40.
no,
No, we-
and I would
I
argue.
don't know if you've ever followed me
Well-
around, so.
Well,
I mean, and that's part of the problem too, because there's different departments.
Yeah,
I see that your chiropractic business, that you have a whole practice
Mhm.
that you make a whole nother income
I
at.
do.
So how do you have time to do 40 hours a week here and your practice? So don't tell me that you work.
Oh, I
40
can for
hours a
sure,
week.
because do you see me on the weekend? Do you know what time I went to the library when we had that flood at 11:30 at night and I was there till 2 a.m? So I mean, that's why I'm saying we can all talk about so-and-so doesn't do as much work as I do.
I work.
So-and-so doesn't do as much work as
And
I
some
do.
months are gonna
but-
be more than
Exactly.
others.
But the problem is, we don't have a lot of understanding. I mean, you don't follow me around. I mean, I can start calling you when I'm out. Well, I was at the library for 3 hours that night,
And I was up
So,
here, you know,
that's
on
fine,
weekends too.
but we're talking about departments, and that's why we're gonna have to make decisions that people aren't gonna like, and they're gonna say, oh, y'all don't do the work, y'all don't do. I've heard it all the time. And I do have another job, but the thing is, I haven't missed a meeting. I haven't had anything in my job since I've been in this office.
No, I'm not
So,
saying that.
what I use for comparison is not any other business. It's other counties around us.
Right.
And get the whole top 26 counties, say, and see what everybody's thinking. We're way at the top.
Yep.
By far.
I agree.
And there's one or two positions that's pretty much up there. And I don't compare to any other jobs in the county because nobody's comparable, or not even, I don't compare jobs to you or anybody else. It's the, what do other counties do? And we pretty much topped it out.
Yeah, there's,
One thing I like to add into your comment about the retention or about county employees, like not feeling like, maybe there's anything. What'd you say earlier about long-term employees don't feel like they're,
Well, a lot of long-term employees, they're making this much. Somebody just starts making the exact same thing. Where's the incentive to go to advance to, if you do a good job, you're gonna make more, as well as longevity too, the longer you're here.
but let me tell you this, and I know you guys deal with other counties and I do as well, and talk to people from other counties. Our retention in this county is unprecedented compared to other DA's offices and others from other counties. And because of what you guys have been very generous with salaries. So I don't really think that we keep those employees. We're keeping more employees. I've been in the office I'm on my 29th year. We have other 29-year employees that'll be retiring soon. The only people I've lost in my office have been to elected official jobs or retirement.
Mhm.
I have DAs I'm friends with in other counties. They lose staff for salaries quite often. I know you guys have a very difficult decision, but I don't necessarily agree with the stance of long-term employees feel cheated somewhere because they continue to stay. That's what we have at this county, is we have the retention due to the salary set by the county in the past. We appreciate that. That's the only other thing I'll say. And like I think was said before, and I've talked to Dwight about this several years ago, I think we talked about it, is I do think there are situations where the elected officials consider salaries when hiring a new person in. They don't always hire that person if they feel like it's unnecessary to give them that full salary. I've done it twice since I've been here. I've hired people less than the guys have budgeted to pay that position. It depends on a lot of factors. I think if you come in here, and I don't know how drastic you guys are talking about, you're gonna be limiting elected officials and department heads in that way, in some respect.
so let
Really a lot of respect.
me say something that is,
And
oh, sorry, go ahead.
with everything's different with attorneys. For my assistant's position, of course, we have different now with Senate Bill 22, which helps me, but doesn't fit everybody in the county. I can't just hire an assistant. I can't get an assistant, just put an application in and hire somebody. There's been an assistant opening in Gray County in that district attorney's office for 5 years now that's been unfilled because of pay. That's the reason they can't fill that position. We have always paid well here. We appreciate that. And we've had excellent employees I have, very fortunate because of that pay structure. So when it comes to some things, some positions, we may be able to come down on salaries. I would agree with you guys on that, but some may be very difficult for that to happen.
So I think, and y'all can correct me, I don't want to speak on behalf of the whole court. I think what you guys are hearing us is we're trying to cut things to where y'all have to struggle in life and to where nobody wants to work here. And that's not the solution. We don't want to cut to where you guys aren't comfortable and aren't making a living and want to work here. We're saying that if we do, I mean, we pay very well in this county. And I do pay, and I do have a second career. I do very well with this job as well. I'm not against freezing, and I don't even want to call it a freeze because every year we expect a raise. But if we keep these salaries and keep hiring people at the same entry level, there's going to be a time where we say, you can only have one assistant because we don't have enough money to put in there. Like we were saying, we're going to have to cut services at some point because we're going to raise our tax rate to 60 cents. And so what we're saying is we want to find a solution before we get to that point. Not to say, man, you got a new car, you probably shouldn't have done that. We're not trying to cut people to where they don't want to work here and don't want to enjoy their work. I mean, it goes a long way to have somebody work here 20, 30 years. And I think that's great. But the problem is that if we expect a 3% raise every year and we expect all these benefits to not be discussed, at some point, we're going to have to say, what do we cut? Do we cut a whole library? Do we cut a whole museum? Do we cut the airport? Like there's going to be a time where the salaries are going to cause the tax rate, like Dwight was saying, to be to the point that we're not going to be able to look at our constituents and justify the means. And so that's what we're trying to find the solution before we get there, not saying, hey, will you give us $40,000 of your salary? That's way too much. And that's why, this job sometimes is very difficult because a lot of the departments, and Judge, we've talked about that too with JPs. We don't know what you do. We don't know what you do, perspective. We don't know what you do in your office all the time. Y'all don't know what we do. That's why we need to start that communication to where if there is an issue, and I have heard that several times, and I hope you don't think I was trying to attack you or anything. I have heard people come to me and say hey, they have asked me what do you do during the week? Because in the past, there have been commissioners that have said, I make a lot of money for only 2 meetings a month. And that is the opinion of a lot of things that we meet about 4 hours. We meet about 4 hours twice a month. And that's all we do. And
That's up to that individual.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There's opinions in other, that you don't work as hard as this department, or you don't work hard as this department, or we don't need that. And so we're going to have to make these decisions based on communication with all of you, not butting heads and saying, I don't think you deserve that. We want to have communication saying how do we fix it? Like the problems we've talked about, like hiring people in at the same salary. We do have retention, but there have been several people that reach out to us and say that is a problem that we need to fix. And we've said that for several years. That's somewhere we can sit. That's not saying we're trying to mess over the new hire. It's to where we're trying to implement a system like the clerk progression and the deputy progression to where we can continue this for 20, 30 years, to where this next generation of people a lot of the new elected officials and new department heads over the last 5 years are brand new, to where we keep them for 20 to 30 years and then they're happy. And so I don't want y'all to hear us saying we're trying to find the bare minimum to what y'all can survive on for any of us. We want to find a thing that we all can look at the taxpayers and say, this is a system that works. This is what we're all happy to be here, and we all work together to find this solution. So I hope you don't think we're trying to say I'm not going to try to judge you and say, oh, you're not working hard enough, we're going to take your salary. It's maybe a new elected official comes in, they don't need to be making the same amount. That's my biggest solution, or my biggest problem with the salary schedule is elected officials come in on day one and make what an elected official made 30 years ago. And we have to find a solution to that, whether that's 10% of.
How
the
do you?
That's why we're
So it's
talking.
like, how do we find that? Because that is a valid running point.
I've thought about this and just some different scenarios that come up, and I don't know what's right, what's wrong. But and I think Mark has said this before, if you've got Amy running and Nancy decides to run against her and she makes this, well, you can't pay her, it has to be set for that position. Because Nancy's gonna say, well, if
I'm
you
gonna
like
save the
me, I'm
county
gonna
money.
save you $20,000 in salary.
Yeah, you never say that.
And so the only way that this is gonna work is for those that you know are going to retire or who are not going to run again. And you can put it then, say, okay, well, we know Amy's gonna retire, so this position now, whoever runs for it.
It's gonna
is
get
be
X amount.
of dollars.
There's
And then
called,
that's where you have to lower it, because you can't lower it while somebody's running against a current salary.
well, you
Since
can.
it's an election.
But it would certainly be a valid running point if you did.
You're not gonna save like, if it's 20,000, that doesn't save any taxpayer money. And that's on
But
the,
nobody knows that.
that's on the elected official to have to
People will
communicate
see
that.
that and they'll say, oh, right.
I'm voting for Nancy.
Just to save the pennies.
It's gonna save us
Or
20,000.
if Alan decides to run against you
That would
and
be an
we're gonna
elected-
pay
that
him
would be-
45, but you get 60. He's gonna say, I'm gonna use that as my ammunition.
That would absolutely be an issue because
That
So
would
the only way
It
that
would be
this comes
terrible.
into effect is if somebody is gonna actually vacate that position, who's been here for 6 years, 20 years, or whatever, then you can say that. Or, with the salary, if another thing that you could think of is when you set the salary, it's for the term. And so if you're a 2-year term or a 4-year term, this is what your salary is for that term. Instead of, well, this is what your salary is, but then next year you get this much raise and this much raise and then this much raise, so that you're at the end of the 4-year term. I mean, those are just two of the scenarios that I've popped into my head,
Right.
or so maybe a solution. And the non-elected officials going like the deputies and
Like a
doing some sort
step.
of step base to where, 1 to 5 years, this is what the salary is, or
Well, also
making
there's
it a
the
requirement,
incentive
I mean,
base
because
too.
pretty much all of the clerks, they're people that hire individuals who aren't elected officials, for the most part, are conscious and start them at a lower rate or
Right.
start them at the lowest salary.
Level. Mhm, yeah.
And I don't know if you could even make it a requirement that they have to start at the lowest. I don't know.
We're elected officials, I don't, unless you budget at a lower rate.
Hmm.
you know.
Elected official has to be by the position, not longevity.
Because you can decide what you want to pay your person, as long as it's in your budget.
We've talked about the solution is like longevity pay versus salary as well. And so, I mean, when it boils down to it, any of you that run against anybody, any of us, are automatically making more than what the base salary is based on longevity. So if anybody wants to use that in a campaign run, they already can.
Hmm.
So, but they're not going to. I mean, when you go down this list of longevity, there's several that are making a couple thousand that anybody running against us can use and say, we're gonna save y'all a couple thousand because that longevity pay is going away. So, I mean, that argument is, and that's what I said last year, was I leaned more towards
I
longevity.
like longevity for elected.
Well, and one other issue with, you have to post the elected officials' pay at budget time. And so if you're budgeting for this,
I didn't say
But the-
20,000.
the new guy
I
doesn't,
didn't give a number.
the new guy doesn't get sworn in until when the budget started. How
Right.
do you post that person? You can't, that salary is not posted. And it's a requirement of the law that it has to be posted. But I think that you can pay less. You can pay
Yeah.
more.
More than you budgeted for.
Everyone's due diligence for when they have new hires to have their own step plans as an elected official to save money for the taxpayers, period, whether we do pay good and you do get what you paid for, however, even bringing in someone at a lower, make your own step plan as an elected official, and then y'all make.
Or
y'all's-
department head.
And then y'all make y'all's, step plan for the department head so they can implement in their department because y'all are over their department.
So.
But that's not happening everywhere.
Well, that's what we're here to talk about
Right.
doing that.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. That's not
Right.
everywhere. I mean,
And I think
most
that
people
if
do, but
each
not everybody
elected
is.
Official took their own due diligence to do their own step plan in their office and do something like Alicia said, the 1 to 5 years, this is the rate that they're gonna be at, or, even 1 to 3 or whatever, and give them that incentive of increase.
I've got.
Thanks, Mark.
Sorry, guys.
No, thank you.
Thanks.
But I think that's, what we owe to the taxpayers as being elected officials in the first place, because we do want to be, careful with the taxpayers' money, of course. They're the ones that pay us. So they're the ones that take care of us. But that's something that, that we as elected officials will have to implement on our own. And then y'all are, of course, in control of the budget, but as elected officials, you give us a budget, we spend it, but you don't always have to spend it. If you get that budget, you don't have to spend that, you still can be thrifty with your budget. And a lot of times that doesn't happen.
So on the department heads, I mean, we've asked this for a couple of years. I mean, the tiered system is not a requirement for our departments. But is what the one, some of them don't have it. I mean, that is something we could implement as a court for new hires going forward. I mean, it's gonna be a lot of gray areas for different positions and stuff, but so that's one problem or potential issue that's been talked about. Second one that we'll talk about, that has been mentioned the last year or two. She left, but Angelica had talked about her pay, so we need to address that at some point. Because that'll come back up again. But so I have a question for the elected officials, because I know everybody gets sensitive because we're talking about, or not sensitive, I don't want to say sensitive, but defensive because we're talking about our stuff. So are you guys happy with somebody coming in, if you work there for 30 years and taking your salary on day one if they win? Like making,
Sure,
yeah.
if they ask, would you do it?
I'll be doing the same thing
Because
we did.
Yeah,
You
they're
go-
gonna be doing the same stuff.
Yeah.
So whether they've.
And
been
so-
there
They don't
forever-
necessarily have
All
the
right.
knowledge.
Right, that's where I'm at.
Something.
They don't have the
They still gotta
experience
fill
and the
that
knowledge.
position.
exactly.
Not
Well, it
necessarily,
just
somebody
depends,
might
just
come in.
depends. Somebody comes in, I mean, mine's a little bit different. I've been practicing for 25 years and I
Yeah.
come in, I've been on the other side of it, but I've been doing it.
So to push back a little bit about that, you haven't done county law though. And so there have been a lot of questions that we had to figure out. I mean, not we, but like trainings and stuff that we all have to do that governmental jobs are completely different. Well, I don't want to say completely. There was still a learning curve though.
That's about 10% of my job. And anytime you're a lawyer, lawyers don't show up and you ask them a question and they immediately know it. That's why I hesitate to come live to meetings a lot of times, because I feel like people are gonna say, well, what's this?
Right.
Well, probably 90% of county attorneys haven't dealt with that. But if I say, I don't know, I gotta go look, and the public's gonna go, well, our county attorney doesn't know what he's doing. That's not the issue. But I would add that as far as like the elected officials, yeah, if the elected official knew what its salary was gonna be lower before they ran, I can understand, but once we get into office, I mean, is it fair to start talking about, okay, we're gonna lower the salary at this point?
I don't think any of us said that. I don't think any of us said we're gonna
Well, I
lower.
just-
I don't
Y'all are
think
making
anybody wants to
that.
lower anything.
We've already said that.
Because I feel like I'm all with y'all about the employees. I haven't had any turnover yet, so I haven't had an opportunity to do it.
Right.
But I'm absolutely on board with trying to minimize the hit that the county takes when we rehire people. I think there should be an opportunity to come in front of y'all and say, hey, this is kind of a special situation, and I really feel like I need to pay X because this person is very valuable. I mean, when I was in private practice, I lost people to Phillips, the county, the city, all the time,
Mhm.
and it was a pain. And I'm happy now that I have the ability to retain people, but I'm right there with you as far as if we have turnover and we're able to save money, absolutely.
So y'all are happy with somebody coming in and making the same, this is a two-part question though. So are you as elected officials okay with what every other elected official is making?
They'll never answer that.
Yeah.
That's,
I don't think
that's public. Yeah, that's,
Why is that relevant?
yeah,
Why
that's,
are we pitting people
Yeah.
against each other?
yeah, that's not.
I
Well, we're
don't
not-
understand why we would do that.
I'm not trying to pick people. I'm saying there's a problem with,
It's like we're coming to this meeting and we're just like, we just throw it out there. I feel like if you guys want to change something, come up with a proposal. And say, hey, this is what we think, and then let's talk about it. Let's just don't come in and say, you have a problem with what Jerry makes, or I just don't think that's the way to do it.
well, I apologize for that question. I didn't mean it like that. But
And
so, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, I didn't mean it like that. I do see that, and I apologize for that question. There are, my reasoning for asking that, and I'll say that, is because there are a lot of, you say come up with a proposal, and we do. Nobody shows up to the meetings, and we hear about it for the next year because we're the bad guys making that. So I try to I want to bring people to the table and find solutions to the problems that are being talked about. And so I didn't mean to, and I do see that. So I apologize for asking that. I didn't mean it like that, like a personal thing. Because I've had people come to me and say, I make too much as a commissioner. So that, I was meaning more like towards like me and other, I didn't mean, and I apologize. So I'm sorry for asking that question. But
But I would say to that, I mean, you guys said, let's meet about and talk about
Yeah.
salaries. Just about everybody showed up.
yeah, no, and I'm
I think we
happy.
got people involved and ready
Right.
to talk.
And that's why I ask you guys, and I'm not trying to pit people. That's why I try to, we were talking about retirement. With the insurance, like Dwayne, I think Dwayne brought it back up. We asked, what would you guys like? And it got brought back up because people spoke up. And so I'm glad there's a lot of people here. And that's why I try to communicate with you and want to hear. And I don't, when people, I've had somebody come to me and say, I'm making too much, and I don't get offended. Like, we talk about that stuff. And so I was asking that just to try to make sure, do I?
I've never had anyone say that to me. No, have y'all?
Well, and
Oh, I
that's-
was saying that for me.
Well, that's one thing I would say too,
And so-
is how many people are coming to you complaining? Because I feel like it's a very small percentage of citizens. that-
Oh, no, they're either officials or like employees here. So that's why I try to bring people to the table to where we can try to figure out as many solutions as we can. I wasn't trying to pit people against each other. I'm trying to get problems on paper to solve that. So forget I asked that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so nobody's come to me. It's just business 101. When you look at your salaries going in and how much, so when I first saw the problem was when I looked at how much salaries were based on our operating budget. And I was like, ooh, that seems pretty high for a social service organization, municipality, whatever. And so it is my specialty to look at those things. And I was like, okay, we got to fix something. And I looked at us commissioners first, said, okay, what's our average hours, blah, blah, blah. We did some comparisons, and then Miss Kathy at that time helped me, and we looked at some other counties, as Ben had said, and we looked at the per capita and what's our job duties versus our pay. And we talked about maybe having what we call a cap, a salary cap, that you go this far based on the per capita. We're not talking about cost of living raise or any of that. Just this is for this position, unless our population grows, this is as far as we can go in the salary, unless our population grows. Now, cost of living, of course, can change, and we may throw percentage in there to accommodate for that. There was not anything personal or anything, is just looked at the budget, go, whoa, our pyramid's upside down. Our business plan is upside down. And so that's what prompted a discussion. In that, I heard that previous people were talking about this exact same thing, that this was not new to the county. This was something that they were talking about prior. And I was like, oh, cool. So we already kind of have a plan. And I really thought personally that we would, as commissioners, I've shared with them, is we would start with our departments, the 6 departments that work for the court directly: museum, library, IT, airport, maintenance, janitorial, all of those things that we are their bosses. And then we would kind of make sure, I even talked to Dwayne, I don't know how many years ago, saying, we got to be sure, what do you think about a tier program? Whoever you bring in, start them at a lower rate, not, and just kind of raise them up at that. And he even said, oh, that sounds good. We'll look at that. And so it was kind of positive to kind of move forward. The only thing that I felt a lot of kickback was when I said, and what about some of our elected official salaries? What if we kind of, find some caps or something where we kind of, and oh my Lord, I basically said, I'm out. This is, we're treading on waters no one wants to talk about. I didn't hear anything negative. Well, I did hear negative. Everything I've heard from employees say, well, you commissioners make too much for what y'all do. I heard that from everybody. You don't have to say that you didn't say that, that's fine. Whether you did or didn't, it doesn't matter. I may agree with that statement, to be honest with you. And so we've even talked about it, because when I heard that, I was like, you know what, there may be some validity that we make as too much as commissioners. And we've talked about that. I've called the several commissioners and they were like, well, I can understand their perspective. Nobody took it personal. Nobody was offended. The couple commissioners I talked to, they were like, well, what do we do? And then when I mentioned to the judge, she was like, I agree. Let's look at maybe a possible freeze. That was last year, wasn't it, Judge? And I was like, oh, that's cool. So what I heard was positive from this court that, yeah, we need to look at something. So I was pumped up. I was excited. And, but I just don't want our pyramid to flip over where all of a sudden we can't buy base material. We can't buy, we have to close, we have to cut, we have to close offices, we have to close some services because our salaries and our benefits are too high. And we're not there yet. Please hear me. I don't think we're there, that this is something we got to do, but in 5 to 10 years, we will be. And some of you are like, well, I'll be retired. That's not my problem. I don't have to worry about it. But it would be so
We're all
great.
taxpayers.
Yeah, we're all taxpayers. It would be so great if in my time as commissioner, we were able to get a solution that will benefit the county for 30 years, even after I'm gone. Wouldn't that be cool? And so I thought, well, let's come up with a plan and figure it out. I haven't heard really, I would say 1% negative from the employees talking about salaries. One thing I have since just bringing it up, I heard through the grapevine that Dwight's going to come in here and just cut out everybody's salaries and try to live bare minimum. I've heard that from county employees saying that they're worried about what Dwight's doing. And I was like, oh man, that breaks my heart. But again, at the end of the day, I don't answer solely to the employees. I answer to the constituents who elected me to be a good steward of their finances and to set policy and procedure to help govern as well as provide protection and service to them. And so I'm always willing to look at it. What's cool about setting up and looking at our finances, salary wise or whatever, is we're talking about it. That's amazing to me. I think it's something good. I do know that it's when you start talking about people's money, people get defensive, even though they say they're not, they are. And it just happens in every organization I've ever been a part of. And so I know it's tense and everyone's going to say who does what and how much work everybody does. That's in every organization I've ever been a part of. When you start talking about salaries, it's okay. It's just something for us to look at. I love what Amy and Chris and Ben has said is if you all will just look at your departments and kind of figure out, okay, here's a base pay. And some of you already do that. So good on you for doing that. That's a huge blessing. And I think it's awesome. I would argue and I hate Mark isn't here, tenure was a big deal for baby boomers. It's not a big deal for Generation Y, millennials, all of that. They'll switch jobs like crazy. So when you say you have a lot of tenure, it's probably because they're baby boomers still. And though that generation's disappearing, because I mean, you can look at any stats. You don't believe me, just Google it. people's long commitment is only 5 to 7 years in a current
You're
job.
assuming that though, you don't know the future, you don't know that, someone that's 25 years old, 20 years old could get hired and not work and have tenure here. That's what I'm saying, I mean, they're not just gonna, you're assuming that they're all just gonna hot potato around. And when you have the people that come and work and wanna stay, you've got the experience there, and it just helps the offices run so much better, is what I'm saying. Because you're assuming that that's what's gonna happen
Yeah.
future down the road.
And I think that's what he meant, that it, with the salaries being set higher, that it enables the county to retain those tenured employees.
Yes.
Not that the employees are choosing to stay. I mean, they're choosing to stay because but it's a benefit for the county.
Yes.
Not necessarily, he wasn't talking about the employees staying. I mean, it was a benefit for his office to not have turnover, that you have to retrain people or.
Well, and the point I'm making is regardless of the stats on what that is, my stats are nationwide. It could be wrong, like you said, it's not based on Hudson County. But when you pay someone who's only there 5 years, and then that next guy comes in at that 5 year, and then that person leaves in 5 years, you're really just keeping financially, you're just paying the same employee, from a financial spectrum, whether they're here forever or whether they're here for 5 years. It's not about their tenure. It's about, because people aren't per se working for money as much as they were before. They're working for purpose. People have left the
They still have
plant.
to put food on the table
Right.
and everything. That's what I'm saying. They're not just, they want to work for a purpose but they've got to be compensated for it as well.
Right. And I'm not arguing that
Yeah, I
at
think-
all.
I'd like to say this about what was said earlier, and I think I said it, but, we are one of the top paid counties, we are, but you always have to keep in mind, who are we competing with here? We're competing with refineries, we're competing with plants, we're competing with oil field, and we're not that far from Amarillo. So if you want to keep people, you're gonna have to pay more. Now, you get in some of the other counties, they're a little further out there, and they don't have that stuff, and they do pay a lot less, but if you want to keep people, we will have to pay a better wage than most area counties. So
I think that's how we got to this point. That's what I was
I
always
think
told.
that's exactly how we got to
Yeah.
this point,
That
because a few
they-
years ago, when the oil field was booming and you couldn't find employees, you either pay or.
We incentivized them to come work for the
So-
county by offering those.
And I don't
higher
want it to be
salaries.
misleading that, well, we need to compete with these other counties, because we can never compete with some of these counties.
Well, they just have different
It's not the
demographics.
same,
than we
yeah.
do.
And so, we're always pay more than they do.
I've never
Okay.
had anybody in my precinct complain about what I make. And I'm okay with lowering or freezing, whatever. I'm okay with that. It's not about money for me.
Judge, did you have something?
I did, and so kind of leading off of that, I know you said that's comparing apples to oranges with like the refineries that we have around here and everything else, but we do, like it or not, we do have to be competitive with some of these other places, and we are lucky to live in a county where we have those opportunities and we have, some of the higher paid jobs. But at the end of the day, if you want quality people, you are gonna have to compete.
And
The other
those
thing
quality.
that I wanted to mention is that, a little bit ago when we were talking about like, how do we feel about what other people make and everything with that? That's just, it's easy to look at, okay, this person makes this much, oh my gosh, they're overpaid. But at the end of the day, none of us know what anybody else does in their job. And nobody up there knows what we do outside of Judge Irwin. And even then, things have changed so much. We're doing things now that have never been done before. And that's just the way that it goes. But it's not fair to sit and say, well, this person makes too much, that person doesn't. However, I can only speak at the JP level. And I think kind of how we got here, and again, this is personal opinion, but in the past, I know there's been some percentage raises. And so the people who are already making a good salary, are now raised to, you know, it's a sticker shock where you look at that and you're thinking, oh, well, you know, here they are now way up here while you've got some other people that are still down here. So if you do a freeze, that kind of leaves some of the lower paid elected officials who aren't necessarily underpaid, but they're not necessarily overpaid either. And that's speaking from the JP standpoint, is that the average pay for a JP is 93,000 in the state of Texas. We're at 68. So I don't feel like, yes, we are well paid, and I'm not saying that we're not, but I'm saying that we're not grossly overpaid to where we should be frozen for, you know, any period of time, because our clerks also are not that much lower than us. And so again, we don't want to run into a situation where we're on call 24/7, 365. We work nights, weekends, we're called out constantly. We have to deal with things, you know, and from a judge's standpoint, we are bottom of the barrel. However, that doesn't mean that our jobs aren't important or heavy either. And so I just think that kind of puts us at a point to where I don't necessarily feel that a freeze is appropriate. We know there's a problem that needs to be fixed. We just need to figure out.
I've never voted for percentage raises.
Yeah, and I'm on either.
Time I've been.
Yeah, and I think it's been a little bit, but I think that's kind of gotten us.
Since this
to
court's
where-
been here, we've never given
Yes,
one.
but I think I'm just saying that's kind of gotten us to where I think part of the problem was with the higher salaries is it's easy for us to look at each other and say, well, dadgum, I'm working just as much as they are. Why do they make this and I'm making this? Well, you don't know what they do.
So,
Well, I want
It's
to,
easy to say, y'all come to 2 meetings a month. Well, I don't know what you do in your jobs. I don't know how often you're working, how often you're not. And again, that falls back to our own personal work ethics, because some of us may put in a lot more than others in our same exact position. And that again, just falls back to your own personal work ethic. So
I just want to be clear. The freeze was for us when we talked about it. It wasn't for anybody else. We were talking about freezing us,
I
the
didn't know that,
commissioners.
so I thought it got mentioned for.
Yeah, it was just to us.
That's how we all.
Yeah, it was for
Well, I
us.
think everybody's, and it still kind of sounds like that. I think everybody's taking it like we're gonna try to knock it down to like $5,000 for you guys for a year for salary. And that's not like 3 or 4 years ago when I said this, that there was a problem. Everybody in here said there is gonna be a problem. They said yes. So what is the solution? Help us make the solution. That's what we want to have these conversations. Like you just said, there is an issue. And there will be a bigger issue 5 to 10 years ago. And so we're not here trying to say like who's not working hard. And I really hope you don't hold me against for asking. Sometimes I say things without like thinking them through. And that's not exactly what I meant when I was asking that. But we all agree there's going to be an issue. And that's going to be either down the road, you have to work with less staff, or we're going to have to close programs. How do we not get to that point? Is it a freeze? Is it because it's going to be a higher tax rate is going to be the solution if we don't step in and solve it. So
I think
How do we solve it?
one positive step would be that this court sets the example. Okay, so the departments that we supervise, we can get them on, figure out a schedule and start there. And hopefully everyone else will pattern their hiring patterns after what we have set
That's great.
for the departments that we supervise.
everybody else does, I think, don't they?
Oh, I haven't
Like
really,
everybody else has clear tiers.
I haven't messed with salaries since 2 years ago.
I think
when-
people just kind of, like, I just get a lower salary. I don't have anything in place. You know, I think if you actually had, you know,
Oh, so you-
an actual plan in place for everyone. And whether the elected officials wants to use it, they don't have to use it, but
And you can
just
use
have
it,
that general plan.
you can use it for budgeting purposes. and
Yes.
This is what we'll budget for this, this, and this, and then it's up to the elected official to say, well, my employee falls here.
Right.
Because every
And whether I wanna
situation
pay
can
him
be
up to
different.
that is, you
Right.
know,
Mhm.
or maybe I
Yes.
don't want to pay him up to that.
That's fine, you know, have that actual plan in place. So, okay, someone comes in, here's this, if, you know, if they have this, then they get this, you know, and just have more of a step
a step, you know.
Well, we just lost a good employee, Gary, who's been with us how long, Dwayne?
25.
27 years.
Yeah, and so we're gonna be replacing him, and I assume based on the conversations Dwayne and I have had, the next guy's not coming in and making what Gary was making. Cause that just wouldn't make any sense.
But how long are you with
I
it?
can tell you about, I can tell you how I feel, and this is just about my department. I have no idea what it takes to run these other departments, don't want to know.
Yeah,
But in my department, I feel like the guys make a good salary. I feel like I make a good salary. I appreciate y'all for that. I think you do a great job. I think this does need to be addressed. I think this is the time to do it. I think there does need to be a step program. I think there should have always been a step program. But my problem is, I don't think you can back up today and start the program. I think the program has to be started from today forward.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
yeah, I think that's what we're saying.
That's why-
wait, what are you saying? So you brought the new guy in at Gary's?
I have not brought a new guy in yet.
Okay,
But what I'm saying is that when I interview for a new guy, this is in my department. The people that meet the qualifications that I'm looking for, they have a job. There's nobody applying for my job that ain't working somewhere. And I don't have much to offer. And their salary is basically what his salary is. Their salaries are real similar to what the county is going to pay them. So it's kind of their decision. Do they want to work for the county or they want to stay where they're at? And I can't offer them health benefits because they can't afford them here. The health benefits, as far as a family goes, if they're young and have a family, they can't afford to go to work for Hutchinson County if they have to have insurance. So the salary is neck and neck, which I think is a great salary. I'm not saying it should be raised or anything. I think it's a great salary. But the only bargaining chip I have to get them here really is a 4-day work week. And it's tough. I mean, when you find the guy that you really want to hire and you're trying to get him on your team to come on board, and he's like, well, I already made that. It's hard for me to drop, $300 or $400 or $500 a month below that salary and then still get that person. It's tough to do. Now, like I say, from this day forward, if we can start a program that implements.
I'm psycho reading what you're saying, so I get what you're saying.
I think that's great, but it's hard to back up now that I already got 11 employees making this amount of money. Then I bring this guy on or try to get him to come on board for less money. He's not going to leave a job where he's making more money to come over here. Like I say, this is just my department and the type of applicants I get.
See, and that kind of runs us into, like with the scenario with Nancy, like when you came in making less than the assistant, she worked here 30 years. And so, that, or 20, however many years. I mean, that things like that we need to talk about, that like, the tiered says when you drop somebody down at the beginning, it might be right there with somebody who's made it 20, 25 years, even if it's not the same title. So, I mean, all those things are like gray area things that we need to, and like you said you don't understand what they do and you don't want to. We have to try as best we can to understand what every department does. And that's why I try to ask, what are your issues? Like, how do we solve them? Because whether y'all like it or not, we have to make decisions trying to understand what everybody does. And so I have no desire to do what you do because you guys work hard and on the clock all the time, but I have to try and I have to, and that's what, we've talked about, sometimes there's a lot of questions in here and talking about that. There's a lot of gray areas that we have to make the solutions for down the road. And so, I mean, how do we do the STEP program? Your STEP program might be different than the library. And then in the library, they have different titles. So how does that? So, I mean,
I know a lot of other counties that I've seen, bigger, huge county like Dallas County and stuff, they have different salary schedules and it's based on the type of work. So like a IT kind of, job, it has its own little schedule. And then, road and bridge department has its own schedule. And then clerical people have their own schedule. And so it is based upon a job type. That you just have, so you would have to have multiple schedules because,
One size doesn't fit all.
An IT assistant is gonna make more than a library, just because of the industry, IT, it takes more training than it would take for, someone with a high school GED or whatever that could do another clerical or filing or, different kind of position.
What I want to ask is, as we go through this, I mean, I know there's things that you guys have thought of that you're not going to say publicly, problems and issues that you have, whether it's in our department, in your departments, with your salaries, with what we've done. Like, as we talk about this, as we try to find a solution, even if it's not in the meeting, if you'll email me or us, like, we don't want to be the bad guys about this type of stuff, because we are going to be. I mean, there's not going to be, like she said, there's different, we're never going to solve the issue of my department works harder than this department. Why, like, but we want to make it as good as possible. And so find a solution. I don't think we're going to make decisions today. We just wanted to start that conversation because June's right around the corner. Budget stuff.
Everyone should come up with a step plan. The official department head, and then the department heads should give that to y'all, and then y'all can go together as a commissioner's court and see, is this reasonable? Is this something that can be done? That's something that y'all could do, just to get that going before budget starts too. As for new employees, not saying that you're gonna go down and lower any of your employees.
Right.
I'm saying this is just for
New hires.
employees that are coming in and not paying them exactly what the person before them made.
Well, y'all know your department better than we do.
Exactly. So I think if they,
That's not a bad idea.
or if we
Get
even
things
as
rolling.
elected officials, even came up with a little plan, just for ourselves. It does not have to be approved through the commissioner's court, but at least we are, doing what we should do when you do.
I can't imagine not having a step program and a place that you can work yourself up.
We've kind of,
If you're a good worker and you do a good job, you should have a chance to get promoted. But if you're going to stay at the same level with everybody else at the end of time, where's the incentive to work? And it creates a train wreck.
And that's not always gonna be, like y'all said, I mean, you're gonna have to cap it at some point. There's no way that.
Yeah, we
you
probably
can
won't do
give
no
every
capping
year a
here.
$200 raise to everyone.
We won't ever.
That's not gonna be forever.
It's not feasible.
Nobody would, if we voted for a cap, our cars would be set on fire.
Yeah, it would be
Like, we've
destroyed.
already
Yeah.
talked about it.
Well,
I can just
So-
sense any kind
every
of salary.
corporation has a cap, I know we're not corporate, I know we're government, but
But we operate like a
there is-
corporation.
yeah, there's a cap. We just had,
Everybody has their position.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what, but I'm just saying,
I'm
once
good
we start
with
talking about that.
not getting a raise for myself, but I can't speak for everyone else.
And that's also too, we've gotten very spoiled about having that 3% raise for 30 years.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to, sometimes when we say it's a freeze, I don't even, and don't twist me saying I'm saying we're freezing everybody. Like, a year that we don't give a raise isn't a punishment. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of jobs where there's not percentage raises every year or dollar raises every
They
year.
go up, cost of living increase.
Right.
That's logical.
Yeah,
Your
yeah.
living increase goes up, you get to stay even. You're not making anything, you're just staying even.
Again, we don't make gadgets and widgets.
And we
So-
haven't always gotten raises every year. I mean, there's been many years where there's.
There's not
I
many.
don't say many.
There's
I
not
got the
many.
chart of the last 30 and there's probably 4 or 5.
Yeah, there's not a
There's
lot.
not a lot of years that there wasn't, because that's kind of a guarantee of the,
What, 4 years?
because when we voted to not do a raise during COVID,
Mhm.
my phone blew up. Because, I mean, when I said that we should be lucky that we got to work during COVID and everybody else had to go home and not make money, that was still seen as a negative, even though we made a paycheck that whole time. And so, I mean, it's hard decisions to make.
And since I've been here, I just remember 4 or 5 times that we didn't get a raise.
Mhm.
Exactly.
It was amazing. I mean, we took one salary cut.
Right.
And I just remember about 4 or 5 times that we didn't get a raise, that's amazing.
And that's what we want to avoid too, because if we don't fix this problem, we're gonna have to have a salary cut at some point. And that, I mean, just talking about that right now, like, you guys are hearing us.
I hate he even said it.
You got,
Because I
well,
already know there'll be emails. and
Speaking it
phone
into
well, I'm
calls.
saying the truth. In 5 to 10 years, it's gonna be services or salaries. And we want to solve that before we get there. And so before we even leave, I don't want y'all to hear we're trying to make y'all go get a Ford Pinto and drive around and live on that type of salary. That's not what we're trying to say at all. We want to make it.
No, we're talking bicycles.
We want to make it competitive and enjoyable and have tenure, but one of the problems, if he is true on the millennium type of stuff, if we don't fix it with that step program, they can leave and come back a month later and make the exact salary. So they can bounce around wherever they want and still come back
That's what they do.
4 or 5 times and make the same salary, if that is true. So
And we
I
don't
mean,
know if it's true.
we want to kind of avoid that too, to where they can start. Tenure is important. So that step program makes it more important. Where they know if they leave to try to chase something that they're going to drop back down.
Like I said, I think that's great. I think that this program on the entry level has to be enough to attract some.
To
That's
attract,
where we got to depend on you.
And that's what y'all know.
That's why I think that y'all, like each one of y'all should come up with your own and then present it and
Yeah.
then discuss it. Sure.
All elected officials and department heads should have, they know what their office is. And it is kind of weird because most of our judges or JPs and constables only have one assistant. Whereas Dwayne's got 4. Yes, okay.
just the JP.
But you have, but Dwayne has 14 employees and she's got 7 and the airport has 5. And how many you have, Ashley? 3. So it's hard to say, I have a scale for one person. Why is that important? I get it. That would be weird. But for departments that have, but it's okay to have a scale plan, even if you have one
I think it's
employee.
Well, the thought is, if Siobhan left tomorrow, that I wouldn't necessarily start someone, even though I only have one person.
Yeah,
Start them at the same salary Siobhan
right,
left.
exactly. That makes sense. And then what's weird too is like if you retire, then you leave and most of the time y'all's assistant goes with you, right? I mean, or if you get, if you beat someone and you take their office,
They have the right to
Release
bring
that.
in who they
Yeah.
want. Yeah.
so then we got another thing we got to balance out. I mean, we all hope I hope we all hope we get to do this for a while. But if you have an assistant, that's kind of riding on that, but that's a whole nother can of worms.
Well,
Nothing
that kind
important.
of leaves it to where you have to have the perks because like coming in with an elected official, okay, in 4 years, you might not have a job. That's a risk you have to take. So
But
you have to,
we all take that.
you have to make it where it seems worth it.
I know it's tough. Matter of fact, even when we even brought up the salary, one of the things is I didn't know we were getting paid to do this. And so it's kind of exciting to come in. All the public work I've done was volunteer. And so to find out after appointment, we got a compensation was kind of exciting. And I understand that. And so I don't come from a school of knowing that this was a paid gig before we got into it. But I know many people have. Y'all knew what the salary was when you came into it. And I don't want anyone to think, oh, that Dwight doesn't want or need the compensation. But I think it's just something, I'm glad we're talking about it. I don't feel like we have to make any decisions today.
Good thing.
I don't think any of us were really concerned with salary when we took this job, serving the public.
I hope
That's
so.
my idea.
Yeah.
Uh,
But who's this?
But, I didn't know
Had to
there's
get-
gonna be that much running around in my vehicles, all over the county. I've got a big precinct, a lot of miles. Everybody does. So
Then
it's just one of those things
we got a lot of miles.
you learn.
So I like Amy's idea that everyone kind of think about their department, think about their plan, maybe bring that back, email it to me and I can disperse it to the court so we can have some conversation before budget time gets here, so we can kind of maybe make some decisions. So if y'all will think about that and especially our department heads, think about a kind of a step plan and then shoot that back to me and we can move forward.
It doesn't have to be thousands of dollars difference. I mean, like tens of thousands. I mean, it can be a couple hundred, whatever you feel best. People in there.
Anybody else got anything?
Well, I'm sorry I stepped in late, but I don't know if y'all talked about any of our stuff, but us too, as the constables, we're making less than most of the secretaries or in our county. And I know that there's the big stigma of constables all over the county, but also I think that, you know, you get, like, I don't want to speak for Roman, but I mean, he's having to have a second job, probably to sustain his household. So he's not here a lot, and we're not gonna have the quality people either as constables if our salaries are what they are now either. So, I mean, I brought it up a couple times during my budget meeting that our, you know, salaries aren't even touching a starting jailer at this point, a starting deputy at this point. So I see a big issue with, you know, constables, you know, having the salary that they do, because I mean, we're risking our lives every single day, walking up the doors, taking things away from people. And, you know, we don't have receptionists, we do all of our secretarial work, plus all of our jobs, you know, on our own, we don't have extra help at all, but yet we are literally the lowest paid elected officials in our county. So I feel like that really needs to be addressed and that needs to be talked about. And I've invited every one of y'all the last couple of times, you know, come out with me and see what I do on a daily basis. To kind of see what's possible. But I know the stigma has been before that we only do certain amount of things, but that's not what should have been done. But I can kind of see why other constables may have been discouraged from doing what they should have because of their salary in itself. I mean, they were a lot less paid than what I am now, but I mean, I think over the years, you know, it's got raised, but you know, it's not really changed at all. I really feel like that really needs to be addressed as well.
Thank you.
I ask a question.
Yeah, sure.
You mind saying what your solution would be? Like what level do you when it raised, if you were to solve that? I don't mean to put you on the spot. You want to talk about it later? But we've talked about that before.
I think we did kind of talk about I was here for budget, but just because they've had some, like how they're doing their tier program, but I really think the constable should be at a level of what even like a captain at the sheriff's office is making. I mean, we have to make big decisions. We're stuck in the middle of being an elected official too. So I just don't really see it as a good fit that, like I said, we're making a low amount. So I feel like it should be, I mean, I can see a step program being good, but I don't know how that looks for elected officials. I kind of thought that was more for employees.
It is.
You know, yeah, so on our end, I really feel like we should be started out, you know, around about that area of what, you know, maybe at the sheriff's office.
So
A captain would be making, I mean, that's still way lower than even the chief and the sheriff, obviously.
That's about 11,000 a year.
Increase. What's the total?
And that would honestly be almost
That's on your
with
paper.
what
Oh.
the JPs are making as well. I think it would put me about the same level as the JP.
JP's make 58,000.
It'd be right around the same price.
A little bit less.
I mean, I'd be even.
Corrections
right there
officer
with,
64.
you know, what the JPs are, you know. at. So.
Okay, anything else? We value your input. I promise we do. So, and if y'all think of something, oh man, I should have said that, just email me anytime. Give me your ideas. Okay, thank y'all for participating. Appreciate it. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right, meeting